Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in and thanks for watching. So let's get right into it. Today we're going to be doing a shell swap of a one-chip Super Nintendo console that I got off of eBay. And we're going to be swapping the shell with a really cool shell that I got from AliExpress. This shell is a clear, transparent purple shell. And I mean, you saw the sneak preview in the beginning of the video. This thing is super cool. I've always been a fan of purple. Always been a fan of the Super Nintendo. And the fact that I'm able to kind of upgrade and not have to worry about continuing to retro bright this yellowing shell over and over just really kind of speaks to me and what got me excited to start this project. I've taken apart Super Nintendos before, so it's nothing new to me. I really enjoy doing it, and this kit is a solderless kit, which is nice. And apologies for the bouncing video randomly. I'm using one of these Amazon phone holders to record the whole process. The only unique tool you need to do this shell swap is the game bit driver, the security bit driver. It kind of looks like a flower. And it's the similar game bit type to opening a Super Nintendo cartridge. And that's what's needed to kind of open your Super Nintendo if you're doing a shell swap. You can see this one's in pretty good condition. I normally would alcohol swab most of the insides just to kind of remove any rust or any other dust or debris that I see inside. But you'll see that I don't see a whole lot once I get in there. And there's not a lot of screws. There's kind of two long screws that hold down the cartridge connector, and then two really long screws in the back of the console to kind of support the I/O ports going out to the TV. But other than that, I mean, this thing is super easy once you get inside, and you only need that specialized game bit flower Phillips head. Well, I don't even know what you call it, the unique tool just to open the shell. Once you get inside, you only need a Phillips head screwdriver. Anyway, you could see that the only part that won't be changed purple is that back piece. And that's because you'd have to solder to remove that piece. And this kit doesn't come with it. For the Super Famicom shell swap that Bitfunknix offers, I don't even know how to say that, you can have the choice of soldering off the back, which I would do if this kit had it, but it doesn't. So, and that's fine. It's in the back of the console anyway. It doesn't really make a whole lot of difference. And you can see I'm alcohol swabbing a bunch of stuff, showing off the one chip logo, and you can see the big fat chip there. I think that's why it's called the one chip, I'm pretty sure. If you opened up a two chip console, it'd be like 2 or 3 of those chips instead of that one big fat one there. Anyway, I'm just cotton swabbing off some dust. I don't really see a whole lot here, but I'm just doing it anyway just to be thorough. If it looked really bad, I would probably open it up and get in there. You can see that kind of piece right there is really rusty, but I don't really use that piece to connect to the TV or anything anyway, so I'm not really caring about it a whole lot. I'm just getting in there. I kind of loosened up a cotton swab to get into the actual TV port there. And then I'm just kind of seeing how it fits back on to the shell again, just to kind of put it off to the side. And here I'm cleaning off the little metal shield, and that's the cable interference shield. I'm getting some in the little reset button, and you'll notice later that I intentionally don't hook up the reset button. I don't know, I never really used the reset button a whole lot, and this is just kind of preference of mine, so I'd rather just not even have it connected at all. And it also avoids the unintentional flick of the reset button, which is super easy on these consoles if you've ever played on a Super Nintendo. So now I'm taking out the shell itself, and I always thought it would look cool, but seeing it in person is really cool. I mean, this thing is a really deep purple and it's clear. You know, sometimes you get these shells from AliExpress and they say they're clear and they're not really clear. They're kind of more of a opaque clear where you can't really see all the way through, but this thing is crystal clear, and it kind of makes me afraid to scuff it up once I assemble the full thing. And it is kind of fingerprint prone, and I think that's just a side effect of it being so clear. But I mean, I think it's worth it. This thing is super cool, and you'll see it kind of gives you a bunch of parts. And some of these are kind of the parts that go on the top, and you have to kind of take out parts from the donor shell to kind of make it all work. So your old shell won't be able to go onto another Super Nintendo if you happen to have just a PCB lying around. You'll have to use donor parts from the original Super Nintendo to make this kit work. I think it's funny that you could see my reflection in the shell itself at the bottom there, which I think is pretty funny. It just kind of shows and showcases how clear this thing is and how reflective and shiny it is. But again, the side effect to that, if you consider a side effect or ancillary effect to that, is that the shell is very fingerprint prone. Alright, you see I removed that little port off the back, that little metal piece. You'll use that to swap into the donor shell. I didn't take out the back metal one, and I did that on purpose because that back metal one, if you swap that to a new shell, or if you keep it in the original shell, it rattles around when you're moving the Super Nintendo. So, I put it in this one, but I would kind of suggest that back metal bracket that you can see there that I kind of swapped from the donor shell. I would suggest not installing it. It's not needed. I don't know what that's even used for. I'm pretty sure it's for some like expansion port or it's connecting to something else, but I've never seen it being used, and all it does is just kind of create this like rattle once you move the console around, which maybe is not a big deal if you have it sitting on your shelf, but just want to add that insight as I've done a few of these now, and I probably wouldn't have put it in there if I had thought about it before, because I'm going to be keeping this one for myself. Anyway, you can just see I'm just using the tweezers, a little extra to put in the shells, and I'm messing around with my fingers. And I'm mostly doing this because I don't want to drop the screws into the shell. I don't want to scratch this thing from the inside. And that's kind of one thing to be really careful with when you're doing these shell swaps where you have a clear shell, is to kind of avoid getting as much debris as possible inside the shell. And I doubt that you'll actually be able to see anything, because even though this thing is crystal clear, the shell is dark. But on an actual clear case or something where you can actually see a lot more of the internals and you don't have this nice deep purple to hide any of the dust on the inside, you may see some of that debris, or you may see a finger smudge, or you may see something else that you may have wished that you didn't use your fingers to kind of get all in there. So that's the kind of idea behind using the tweezers. And I noticed I kept the bottom kind of screen protector-ish plastic sheet, and I did that on purpose because there's no reason for me to get to the bottom yet until the end. So I'm just, again, trying to minimize as much fingerprints as possible on this thing while I get it assembled. And in a future shell swap video that I'll be doing, I'm going to be using black gloves. I'm obviously touching the inside, but I go back and clean it later. But it would just be so much easier just to use gloves. But there is something nice about using your bare hands to hold something versus using a glove, and that's kind of why I'm anti-glove when doing these like fine motor skill things like a shell swap, even though I know it's not that complicated. But being able to touch and feel the parts as you're getting in there really kind of helps make you feel confident about what you're doing. And sometimes, since you don't have that touch feedback of your bare hands, you kind of lose things or drop things in the shell. So that was my rationale behind not using gloves for this shell swap. Also, this is going to be my personal one, so I don't really care a whole lot. If I was selling it, I may be way more careful and wearing gloves to make sure that this thing doesn't get contaminated on the inside or doesn't have any of those issues that I just spoke of using your bare hands. their hands. So this was kind of hard for me this time around. Usually it's a lot easier. I just don't know what, just wouldn't come out. Usually this piece comes out pretty easily on the other ones I've done. I mean, this one was just really in there, and you know, I eventually do get it out, but what you're doing is trying to remove the controller port top shell. So there's like an actual shell that covers the controller ports, which is pretty nifty for the shell swap. And the kit comes with a replacement one, so you can get the same color uniform all the way around. One thing I like about the Super Famicom version of this shell swap is that it comes with a whole other piece, like a brand new controller port board for you to use, so you don't even have to use one from a donor shell. So in many ways I think that's superior, but I don't know why for this kit it just doesn't come with it. Maybe they're trying to save a little bit of money and focus on giving you the nice clear shell, because I did notice for the Super Famicom version of the shell swap, the shell is not as crystal clear as this one. It has that opaque thing that I was talking to. So you can see you just swap it in there. There's no screwing in for the controller port. It just kind of drops in there, and you just kind of fit it with force. And here I'm just giving a little wiggle test. And you can see I put the connection to the piece, the main motherboard of the controller port back. And now I'm putting in the eject button. So the eject button's a little tricky, but it's not that hard. You just, you know, put in that bar in there, and don't do what I did and drop the spring everywhere. And there's like a little spot where the spring clips into. And I always kind of like mess with the technique and trying to get it. I've seen some people on other videos, they're able to force the spring back, and that's what I was trying to do. But I just couldn't get it to work, and I was afraid of like scratching something. So you'll see I eventually go in there and do it the way that I know how to do it, which is I first put the spring into the bottom connection first, and then I get it into the bottom, and then I kind of pull it over from there. Instead of trying to put in the spring first without putting it in the top connection and then trying to force it over, it just didn't work for me for whatever reasons. Anyway, moving on to the top portion of the shell. Here you can see I'm removing from the donor shell the entire mechanism there, and that's because we're gonna have to take some of the pieces from this donor shell to transfer over to our new shell. And the kit from AliExpress comes from that same top piece that you can see I'm removing the screws from. But there's some pieces that we're gonna need, and it's primarily the springs that open the cartridge slot and that control the reset button. And again, for this part, these are all Phillips head screwdriver. I know you can't see it maybe that well in the video, but it's just a regular old screwdriver, and I'm using an electric one. I wouldn't use a power drill, but you know, this one's pretty nice because it just gives enough torque to kind of make it easy without risking stripping the screws, which is pretty easy on a much stronger screwdriver. Or you can get one of those fancy ones they sell on Amazon. And there you can see I'm putting aside that reset spring that I was talking about. Another piece that we're gonna have to switch from the donor shell is, you see the power and reset buttons, they kind of clip into that white mechanism there. And what you're going to need to do is pinch those out, and you want to keep those white pieces, and those white pieces will transfer to your donor shell. And they kind of clip in from the back. I was kind of looking at them and debating whether I should use the original power and reset buttons or use the clear ones. You'll see I ended up going with the clear ones. I just think they looked really cool, and I figured why not use everything that came with the kit. But in other kits where, you know, you get some contrast from using the purple ones, and that's kind of iconic of Super Nintendo, I use the original donor power and reset buttons in those cases. And you can see I'll show you eventually that you're supposed to have taken out that reset piece and put it in an earlier step that I didn't cover, and I did that intentionally. And once you do that, you just reverse it, and I kind of skip over that in the video here, but you just reverse the same steps to get the shell back, and I just cut that out, that part out of the video of my recording. So once you get the top shell all ready to go, Then you just put it onto the bottom shell and it should fit nice and snug. The controller port should start to click into place because now you have the both pieces that kind of give it the friction needed to not need screws. And then you put back the original flower head screws that you need for the game bit driver to assemble the case back together. And what's cool about this case, it also comes with an extension port cover that matches the color of the shell, which is cool. Anyway, I mean, this thing just looks really cool at the end. It got me really stoked about this shell swap in particular and this color. I just want to share with everyone, just show how really cool this thing looks. Just screwing in the last bits back into the shell. I love the mirror finish and how you could see my reflection in the console itself. I didn't even notice that while I was doing it. I'm just noticing now while I'm doing the video. The only reason I'm shaking it around is I'm trying to get the screw to go inside of the screw hole rather than trying to jam it and scratch up the inside of the case. That's just me being very particular, but I think you could probably push it in with this screw bit itself. And there you go. Just look how cool. I just gave it a quick wipe at the end there. And then we're going to put in some cool stickers I got off of Etsy to make this thing look like an actual Super Nintendo. And you can see I'm just testing the cartridge, giving it one quick wipey. And I'm putting the old donor console where the Super Nintendo logo is, just to kind of get a reference point to see where the new sticker should go. And the color I got here was this metallic silver, which really contrasts well with the console color, which I really liked. And it's just super cool. Anyway, I'm doing the same thing here for the power button. I kind of goof up the reset button. I put it a little bit too high, but I didn't feel like taking off the sticker and putting it back for something I'm just going to keep in my personal collection. You can see I kind of goof it up. I get it centered. I just get it a little bit too high, but it still looks really cool. I think it's hard to notice. I don't think it's worth taking it off for something I'm going to keep myself. But anyway, for whatever reason, I just really missed the mark there. I'm putting that right in the middle. And then the eject button on the original console, you can't see it here, but it is in the middle towards the front there. So that's where I'm just kind of making sure those things are all in place. And then the original console, the Nintendo logo is kind of offset in the back. What's cool about these stickers is you kind of put them on and take them off, so just the letters stay after you're done. So it looks really, really clean when you're done. I mean, it looks great. It's hard to capture in video just how really cool this thing looks at the end when we're all said and done. Now, even with the goofed up reset button I got there. Now, the reset button was a little tricky to do it, but I was able to get it. Probably if I were to do it again, you could kind of put a game in there and then it'll kind of force the eject button to kind of stay up. Anyway, here's a quick clip of the final result. Thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe.